For those of you who don't know me, my name is Steve Schwartz. I run the LSAT blog, and I also host the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast. And tonight I'm joined by Christine Carr of Accepted, formerly of Boston University School of Law. Christine, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. And the tech issues were mine, so I apologize because it was certainly from my end, but hopefully we'll move forward and make it worth the wait.
Fantastic. So Christine, you want to share a little bit about your experience at Accepted and previously at Boston University School of Law?
Sure. So I'm in my second year of working with accepted.com. It's a great resource for law school applicants. Linda Abraham, who runs the business, she's wonderful and has been a great mentor for me in working on the consulting side, because previously I'd been working 9 years as a law school admissions committee member as the associate director of admissions at Boston University. And from that end, you have while you're very much interested in the applicants path to college and their narrative, you have a different perspective. And so coming on the consultant side, I'm really enjoying the experience and using my insight and my experience from law school admissions to assist the applicants on the other side, which has been great.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say that I appreciate your sharing your insights and advice with us this evening. I thought that we could start off just by talking a little bit about the recent LSAC policy changes this year with the LSAC going digital. I've been getting a lot of questions from students around how to handle cancellations, how to handle retakes, how to handle if there's a digital LSAT tech issue of some sort, as there have been many this year. So I guess the biggest question that comes to mind is, for those who have experienced some kind of digital LSAT snafu with the tablets not working properly and then perhaps having to cancel or have to retake in the future, is this worth writing an addendum about?
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially in issues like that, you should be asking the LSAC to write a memo on your behalf when the issue is something that's the administration of the test that forces a retake or it causes complications. I look at it as being similar to when we would get notifications from both applicants and the LSAC when there was construction at a test site and that interfered, or we would get notification from the LSAC that a lot of the paper tests had been lost in the mail or lost in transit, and so a whole faction of test takers had to retake because essentially their tests went missing. So there's going to be glitches on both ends. I think it's a move in the right direction. I think that the LSAC has been very deliberate in making the change. The LSAC is a slow-moving machine, and it would seem that they've been behind the times as far as making this move to digital when it seems all other entrance exams are digital. So I think that they've been very deliberate in making sure that all issues are taken care of and all things have been troubleshot, essentially. So your question, my long-winded answer to your question as far as writing an addendum, I think it's worth sending a note to an admissions office saying that there was trouble taking the test, and here it is, and it's generally backed up by the LSAC. So I think it's fine to do that.
Okay, good. That's good to hear. Now, when you said about LSAC writing a memo, is this something that would appear on the score report, or would it be submitted to law schools separately?
It would be submitted. Yeah, it's submitted separately. So the LSAC puts into an applicant's file notification. Basically, it's generally done on the applicant's behalf when the applicant asks for the LSAC to do so, or we get notification via email from the LSAC saying, at test center such and such, there was an issue and this was the issue, and test takers were given the option to retake, or there'll be a delay in the scoring. So we would get notifications like that all the time. And so I think that it's always good for an applicant to be proactive and reach out to the LSAC to ask for that, but then also do the notification on their own as well.
That's a good idea. So addendum on the applicants and also a memo from LSAC just to ensure that all bases are fully covered.
Exactly. You want to make sure that everything is covered.
But that being said, if the applicant has a lower than desired score, I suppose at that point, the only option is then to retake or be satisfied with a less than ideal score.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where, given those instances where, perhaps you had to do a cancellation or perhaps your test was affected by a glitch on the digital LSAT, that you are, if your score was affected, write an addendum to say your score was affected. If you feel like in the moment that you know that your score will be affected and you want to cancel. Cancellations are not as big an issue as people believe them to be. I think that, life happens, things happen, and not, you don't want to be judged on just one day of a test. And so to cancel a test is fine as long as you retake when you are better able to get a stronger score.
I appreciate that. Now, just to clear up confusion, I still hear this a lot. Can you please confirm that law schools do not average multiple scores, that they only take the highest?
Yeah. I mean, there might still be a dinosaur school that will average the scores, but at Boston University, we did not average. From speaking with a lot of my former colleagues, they did not average. The consensus was assessing an applicant based on their best day, which is their best score.
Right. So that's good to hear. So for that reason,
excuse me,
whether the applicant cancels or not, if there was a digital LSAT tech issue, for example, there is no downside to retaking since schools will only consider the highest. And if you do worse, no big deal.
Right, exactly. I mean, to say quote unquote, no big deal, I never want to say that when thinking about the application. I think all aspects of the application are a big deal. But it's not going to really affect your the assessment. And I say that on average it's not going to affect. But if you were to take a score and get a 166 and then take it again and get a 153, that discrepancy, there might be need for some explanation as to why that's happening. And it's just because it's just a large difference. And you never want to have the admissions committee ask the question like what happened there, and not have it answered in your own words. But then again, ultimately you will be assessed on the high score.
Right. And a score drop of that significance, I mean, that would say to me that something went terribly wrong.
Exactly. Right. And that's what I mean is so, the admissions committee, appreciates having questions answered. And so, they're exactly what you said, like there's something that happened. Please tell us what that is. And so that we can understand. And then the admissions committee is like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
And so we'll take the 166.
Yeah. Normally what I see from applicants is barring some extreme circumstance, what happens is maybe their true aptitude is a 160. And then if they retake without any additional prep other than staying fresh, they might drop a few points or increase a few points within that margin of error or score band. Right. But it's a little bit of the luck of the draw in that case. But if they went up 3 points, obviously a 163 is better than a 160, significantly so. Right. 3 points might not seem like a lot to the average person on the street, but given law school admission indices and such, 3 points could make a difference between a yes or a no, or between getting more scholarship money.
And that's a great point, Steve. And I think that, it's important to understand that when schools and when the LSAC talks about that score band, that plus or minus 3 from your score puts you in that band. That's based on statistics, that's statistical significance, that and all of that. But in real world applications, exactly what you're saying, those extra points open doors for both admissions and then ultimately scholarship dollars. And so, with a little bit of work, and oftentimes it's just having that one extra level of comfort while you're taking the test. So taking it another time, there's an opportunity to increase your score. And as we say, open doors for both admissions and for scholarship.
Right. Thank you for that, Christine. Now, of course, there are some applicants who they are done with the LSAT for better or worse, and they're looking to see what else can they do to improve their odds, even if their numbers are below the median.
Right.
So I'm wondering, out of all the different pieces of the application, the personal statement, the letter of rec, the resume, what do you think is the standout piece, if there is one?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, in looking at it, when admissions committees are assessing an applicant, they're looking at both the quantifiable measures and what I call the qualifiable measures. So the quantifiable measures are the LSAT score and the GPA. And, and that's hard and fast. Like if you've already graduated, your GPA is what it is. And then if you've already, hit your threshold of pain and can't take the LSAT again, and so your score is what it is, those measures are set. So, but the qualifiable measures, that's where you're explaining your narrative. That's where you're introducing yourself to admissions committees, and basically saying, this is why I want to go to law school. This is maybe why I want to go to your law school specifically. And these are all the characteristics that I'm going to be bringing into the classroom. Because when admissions committees are enrolling classes, they're essentially enrolling communities. And so that class is going to be a class that travels the next 3 years together, and we'll be learning from each other and networking with each other and developing bonds and, basically kind of like getting in the trenches and going into war and becoming the next class of law professionals. And so what law schools are looking to do is enroll students that, will be successful or given all of the measures, they can project success, to some statistical significance. But then looking at the other pieces, they're looking at the people. They're looking at who they are interested in coming into the community. And so when I was at BU, what I would always look for is at BU, there were just so many opportunities for the law students to take advantage of, both offered from the law school itself in those opportunities, but also being in the city of Boston and the opportunities there. And so what I would look for specifically, and what other members of the committee would look for, is evidence of having taken advantage of opportunities. And that comes in a variety of ways. And so it's opportunities of, maybe different job opportunities, and it doesn't have to be legal internships. It can be opportunities anywhere, opportunities of getting involved in organizations that you're passionate about, opportunities that are related to hobbies and other interests. And so, seeing that throughout the narrative. And so ways of doing that are through your personal statement and your resume. And those across the board are generally required for all law schools. Letters of recommendations, some schools require them, some do not. So that's, those are more additional measures that you can bring in and others' perspectives of you. But your personal statement and your resume, those really need to be, your best representation of yourself, so that you are, in a very one-dimensional process, giving a three-dimensional picture of who you are and who you hope they will be enrolling and who they want to be enrolling.
Right. So many nuggets to dive in there, Christine. I appreciate you're sharing that overview. It's great. It's great. I want to dive in specifically on one that relates to a question we got from the audience here. Jeffrey was asking about, basically, if you don't have a ton of work experience, maybe you had one internship, how does that affect your chances? And then in terms of who to ask for a letter of recommendation if you don't have a ton of options in the real world.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of law schools, when they're asking for letters of recommendation, and this is helpful for those that don't have work experience or are coming directly from undergrad, is having the letter of recommendation from an academic, having a letter of recommendation from someone who knows you in the classroom. Because again, the admissions piece is steps. We're looking to set people up for success in the classroom. So all evidence that you can put together for that is helpful in making that assessment. But then to back up to Jeffrey's question about, not having a lot of work experience, that is okay. And, and then it's a matter of not talking necessarily about your work experience, but talking about how you spend your time and how you filled gaps, when you haven't been in school, what have you done otherwise? And so if that means that you have traveled or if you've been a lifeguard, or if you've worked a series of part-time positions to make money, I mean, that's just because you don't have the quote unquote, perfect internship that you think is checking off a box, there is no secret formula. And so it's just a matter of putting all of the pieces together and giving the admissions committee a sense of who you are and what your interests are. And then why you want to go to law school. So if you have been, studying a specific, track in college and you've had one specific interest, just weave that into a narrative as to, okay, that's great. So why do you want to go to law school, and how have all of these experiences informed that decision and informed the person that you are and the person that you will be in the classroom here. So don't worry about having, specific internships or a specific major or anything like that. When I'm working with clients now at Accepted and they're asking about, I don't know what to write for my personal statement, or, I don't have all this work experience, I can ask a few pointed questions, like first and foremost, like in conversation, why do you want to go to law school? And I hear really great stories, and I'll be taking notes and I'll write that down and then say, okay, you just basically wrote your personal statement in this conversation. And so that's the type of thing that admissions committees are looking for, is that kind of like passion about why you want to go to law school, which you don't necessarily have to have an internship experience to convey.
Great. So what I'm hearing is that it's really more about the passion and the compelling story than the specifics of who your recommender is. It's more about what they can share about you. Now, does the recommender, do they have to be a supervisor? That was one of the questions we got. Or could it be a coworker?
It can be a colleague. It can just, it's someone that knows you well and someone that can speak to your character and speak, to your ability to think critically, your ability to work as a team. If they can assess your writing skills, that's great, because you'll be doing a lot of writing in law school and in your legal career. So those aspects. So whether it's someone that you work with directly and perhaps have worked with on a team or on a project, those people are great as well. I know that when we were reading letters of recommendation, we weren't necessarily worried about the title. I mean, a funny story is, so we had an applicant who's one of their recommenders was Vice President Joe Biden, and it was cool. Like that was, oh, that's cool letterhead, and that's great. But it wasn't necessarily, the best letter of recommendation that I've ever read. There were other letters of recommendation from, a colleague or from, a grad student who worked as a teaching assistant in a class that just knew you really well. And so again, it's not necessarily the title or the head of a department that needs to write that letter. It's just someone that knows you well and can speak to your abilities and your character.
Fantastic. Thank you for clarifying that. We got a handful of great questions here from the audience. And Christine, could you just keep your hand away from your chin because it's affecting the microphone? It's fine.
So sorry.
I just want the audio to be as clear as possible.
Yeah.
We had a question from Todd here asking about non-traditional applicants.
Mm-hmm.
Are those with multiple years of work experience out of college for a while, are they typically viewed more favorably? And regardless of whether they are or not, how can they differentiate themselves in their resumes and their personal statements?
Yeah, well, I mean, just by the nature of, years of work experience, they're already differentiating themselves, right? But that said, so in all of the cycles that I worked, it was generally about a third of our students came directly from undergrad, and then 2/3 came with at least a year out, most with, 2 to 5 years out. So we had non-traditional students that were, up to the age of 40 that were enrolling into our full-time program. So, that it's, again, when we are looking and when admissions committees are assessing, they're assessing based on ability. They're assessing based on, projection of, can this person do the work? And so you just need to convey that in your application, that you're able and you are prepared and you are ready to go. And then having the years of work experience, that's going to bring some diversity to your application. And that, that level of professional experience is helpful because it shows an admissions committee that you've been hired, you've held a job, and those are all the things that we are hopeful that you will do once you graduate with a law degree. And that's the end result. So, those are all very positive aspects. And so highlighting that, that's not something that you need to shy away from or feel strange about. That's something that you need to just, shout from the rooftops, because that's a great aspect to an application.
Fantastic. So you'd say overall it's a positive then?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. I even saw one comment where someone's concerned they could be frowned upon for it, but it's certainly not frowning. Necessary to have, but could frowning. Actually be useful.
Yeah, no frowning at all.
What about a gap year? What if someone doesn't have tons of work experience, but they just took a year to do anything at all?
Yeah. If you have the opportunity and if that's something that's of interest to you, I say go for it. And it's, don't make life decisions based on what you think an admissions committee member wants you to do. Make your life decisions based on your opportunities and what you are interested in doing. Some people just want to roll right into law school and have, definite career plans that they want to, keep going and keep moving, keep the wagon going. And then others, want to take a break after undergrad, or even if they've been working for, 3 to 5 years and want to take a break after working and have the opportunity to volunteer for a year or travel for a year. Those are all great things. And that's only if that's something that you want to do, that's only going to make your story richer. That's only going to make your law school experience richer, because you're not going to have the regret of not having done it. You're going to have plenty of years after law school to work and do all of that stuff. So, if you have the opportunity to take a gap year, go for it.
Excellent. Now, I'm wondering if there are any common pitfalls you see with regard to work experience or with regard to resume building, aside from doing things just because you think it'll look good for admissions.
Right.
One thing that comes to mind is I encounter a lot of applicants who value the LSAT so highly that they want to study for it full time for 3 to 6 months. Now, obviously, that doesn't look amazing on a resume, but the increase in one's LSAT score could potentially more than make up for it. At least someone could argue that. So I'm wondering if you would consider that a bad decision, and whether yes or no, if there are any common pitfalls you see.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's not for me to say what someone's good or bad decision is. That said, you will have to explain that gap in your resume. So, for example, on the Boston University application, when they ask you to submit the resume, they ask you to explain any gaps in that resume, that are greater than, 1 or 2 months. And so if you are taking, if you're quitting your job in July so that you can study for the September, November LSAT full time, that's going to be a gap that you're going to need to explain. And, I agree with you that improving your LSAT score, again, as we said earlier, is certainly going to open doors, both admissions and scholarship dollar-wise. But there has to be more to what you're doing in that time period than just studying full-time for the LSAT. And so whether that is, whether your interests are volunteering, or your interests are playing in a band, or, training for a road race, or, dancing, or, however, an admissions committee is going to be interested to know that while you are studying for the LSAT, you are also capable of having a full and complete life and doing this other things. Because again, when we're thinking about people being successful in law school, that sense of balance and life balance is really important. And so when you are in law school, while we anticipate and expect and hope that law school is going to be your focus, we also hope that you are going to be able to balance all of the demands that are on you. And so to be able to show that, while you're studying for the LSAT, I think is important, and convey that, whether it's in your resume where, when you're writing your resume, if you have gaps like that, you need to explain them. And whether you explain it right on the resume or you explain it with an addendum, you need to do that. And so when I'm working with clients, and when I was at BU and talking with prospective applicants about, components, I would always say the resume, it's not a business resume. It's not like a one-page, bullet points. It's almost like a CV. It's almost, that curriculum vitae, where you're incorporating more information than you would normally give in a regular business resume. And that's helpful, again, to expand your narrative and to inform the admissions committee of who you are and who they're ultimately enrolling.
That's a great point. Yeah, it's not a business resume. It's not a work resume.
No.
It's more like an academic resume.
Exactly.
But with more detail.
It's a CV. Right, exactly.
Very interesting. I also appreciate one of the points you made about how it doesn't have to be LSAT versus other things during time off from work. It's not an either or. It could be a both and.
Shouldn't be.
Which I think is great, just because so many students who try to study for the LSAT full time with no other obligations, they run the risk of obsession and burnout.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if you could at least have a hobby.
Right. It's not necessarily and that's the thing, is that so you're replacing your full-time job with studying for the LSAT. And so I would hope that when you have your full-time job and you're leaving your full-time job, you're a human being out and about in the world doing really great, cool, wonderful things. And so I'm hoping that you're doing that as well while you're studying for the LSAT. So convey that, that you are maintaining your other interests, and, that you like to cook. And so you're taking, a cooking class, or, cooking for friends. And so those are, while I'm saying it, and I'm saying it kind of frivolously, like that's still conveying your narrative and who you are, and what your interests are, and that you're bringing into the community.
And that you're a well-rounded, likable person, not just a bubbling machine, bubbling in answers.
Exactly. And you're going to be healthy and happy. Yeah.
Absolutely. We got some more great questions here. I got one here from Emily asking about the pay of so let's say after you graduate from college, your pay might be low, it might be high, you might be unemployed or underemployed or making great money. Is your postgraduate employment or salary, is that associated in any way with law school admissions success or postgraduate employment, post-law school?
No, not at all. That's not necessarily something that is on our radar, or that we're calculating. We do ask, or law schools may ask, and BU did ask, whether something is paid or unpaid. And that's more just, I guess maybe it has to do with more of like the motivation of why you're doing that job. And so if you're doing an unpaid internship, there's a level of, you're doing this purely for the pursuit of the experience and the knowledge. That's not to say that if you're paid, that's not also the case. But it puts some things into perspective. We would ask like paid, unpaid, and then the amount of hours a week, just so that we would know the obligation. And, and all of that said, we would have applicants that were, paralegals at white shoe law firms. And then we had applicants that, I mentioned earlier, that were lifeguards, and, and we had applicants who were flight attendants. And so, applicants are coming from all different walks of life and all different work experiences and just life experiences. And so there's no need to worry about you know, how you have, you know, what you have been doing, how it has like been deemed, the worth that's attached to it. You know, we are looking more at the worth it has been for you. And that's not necessarily a monetary number. Yeah. So that, you know, long-winded answer. That's not something that's on the radar of an admissions committee as to, oh, I wonder how much that person made at that job. And, you know, and that doesn't seem like a very high paying job. Yeah, so that's not a factor. That becomes more of a factor when applying for need-based aid after you're admitted. You know, those are definitely, you know, that's the scenario where you want to kind of play up that you haven't made a lot of money and that you're going to be a poor grad student. But as far as you know, opening the door, that's not going to be a barrier.
Interesting. So yeah, so that could be relevant to the financial aid forms.
Yes.
But as for admissions, is not looking at applicants and seeing what they're projecting their earning potential post-graduation based on what they've earned previously.
No, absolutely not. That's not a factor or an equation at all. Yeah.
Which just seems reasonable to me because, I mean, the law school, people in part are going to law school to increase their earning potential. Absolutely. If they have the law school degree, obviously, then their earning potential should at least increase accordingly.
Right. You know, and that's where you know, the onus is then on the law school to increase your earning factor. That's not, that has nothing to do, you know, at that point, everybody should be coming in as far as, you know, on a level playing field at being zero, because you're all going to be seeking the same toolkit and the same knowledge base. And so you're all coming in without that toolkit or knowledge base. And the law school is the vehicle to fill that up for you, which then is what is going to project your earning potential. So it has nothing to do with your earnings prior to coming to law school.
Right. Unless your parents own a law firm.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because then I would hope that your parents have been paying you well. And then I would hope that you have a secure job after law school as well. So yeah.
All right. Awesome. Thank you for that. All right. So we got some more questions here. Claire is asking about any cliche personal statement topics that one should avoid.
Oh, no, actually. In my years of reading personal statements, I actually have read more good personal statements than bad. And the bad ones are not cliche. The bad ones are just not proofread. And that is like, that like right from the get, that would just turn me off on an applicant when I feel badly, but not too badly, because if I'm going to hire a lawyer, I want to know that they're going to proofread every document that they're looking over. So there's no cliche topics. Essentially you want to be answering the question, why do you want to go to law school? And so, that's kind of the central theme for everybody's personal statement. But yeah, I mean, the only thing that would be bad about a personal statement is having a proofreading error that is, that's obvious that, essentially I'm the first person that's reading your personal statement, after you've written it. So no worries about cliches or anything like that.
So in a way, then the topic is balanced out by the degree to which it's well written. Like the writing ability, the writing style is just as important, if not more.
It's more. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is that, when we're assessing a personal statement, first and foremost, we're looking at the clarity of the statement, how concisely the person, and this from the girl that's been long-winded all night, how concisely you're making your point. And so it's a matter of, is this person a strong writer? And then the subject matter is important because, again, it's your narrative and you're making the application three-dimensional. But again, it's none of that will be cliche. It's your way to showcase your writing ability and then also give the committee a taste of who you are.
Right. This actually reminds me of something related to the digital LSAT writing sample, where admission offices now will get to see, perfectly legible writing samples because they're typed, and there's no opportunity to edit those or get another set of eyes looking at those. So I'm wondering if you might have any advice for applicants who are about to embark on that, given that there's no one else looking over their shoulder on that.
I know. Well, first of all, I had asked, a few years running, I asked representatives of the LSAC if they were ever going to let people type that writing sample. Because, I mean, seriously, there were times when I'm like, a serial killer wrote this. This is ridiculous. My advice is, one, take it seriously. Do not write a snarky letter to an admissions rep, because we are reading it. And while I always enjoy a good joke and a good sense of humor, that's not the place for it. Two, we're not assessing whether you're answering the question correctly or not. So there's no right or wrong way to answer it. But again, we're using it to assess how quickly you're able to think critically about a topic, how quickly you are then able to convey those thoughts, in writing, and putting a cohesive argument together, in a time constraint. So, all of that is difficult, and that's understandable. So just, take it seriously, give it your best effort, and then, now kind of shoot it off into cyberspace. So, but yeah, don't treat it as a joke. Don't sneak in little, we would get it all the time. Like, people would write, first paragraph would be answering the question. The second paragraph would be some like really weird, letter to us saying, I know you're not reading this, and, this is a waste of my time. And, we're reading it going like, no, this has now become a waste of my time. So just take it seriously.
Okay, that's good to hear. And yeah, I agree with you. There is no right answer on this.
No.
In fact, the two options are equally weighted.
Right.
It's more about making a reasonable argument for one side, but reasonable means you're also acknowledging the weaknesses, not saying option A is the best option ever, and anyone who thinks option B is an idiot.
Right. Exactly. Being able to convey your argument in a way that is responsible, professional, and uses critical thinking skills. Yeah.
Right. Excellent. Let's see. So what else haven't we covered? What about the letters of rec? Is there anything more we could share about that?
Yeah. So when you ask, first of all, look at each individual application to get a sense of what's required. Generally the maximum required, or allowable for applications is 4. So if you can have 4 quality letters of recommendation, that's great, but you don't need them. Mostly you're required to submit 1 or 2. So in that case, you want to ask the people that you are confident are going to be able to write you really strong letters of recommendation. And if you ask someone and they seem to hesitate, take that as your message that they don't have the time, they're not sure if they're able to do it, they might not know you as well as you think that they do, and they're giving you the cue that I need to look elsewhere for the letter. And again, as we said before, there's no title requirements. There's no, I need to get the president of the college to write it, or I need to get the head of the department to write it, or some famous author, whatever. You just want someone, again, that can talk about you as a person, about how they know your character, how they know your ability to both work individually, work as a team. If they can assess your writing, again, that's helpful. They can assess your critical thinking and your judgment. That's also helpful. Ask your recommenders early so that you're giving them enough time to write you a thoughtful letter of recommendation. All of that is good. And then submit a resume. So if you're asking your recommender, to write you a letter, if your personal statement is done, send them an email with your personal statement and your resume, so they have an understanding of why you're pursuing this endeavor. And so they can, it's almost like they'll be able to bolster their argument for you with a little bit more facts as they're going through. Right.
The more detail you can give them, the easier you're making their job.
Exactly. And you're tailoring it to who you are too. I mean, in that respect, you're controlling the narrative as best you can, because this is the one aspect of the application that you have the least control over, because you're essentially putting in the hands of someone else. So the more information that you can give them, the more advance notice that you can give them, is all helpful for getting the best result.
Right. And what about those cases that are less rare than I might have thought, where the recommender actually gives the applicant the ultimate control by saying, you write it, I'll sign it. What do you do? What do you do in that situation?
I know. I plead the fifth. I mean, ultimately, an admissions committee is not going to know that. If that is your only option, I think that you can maybe help a recommender. But even in that, if someone is telling you, I don't have time, you need to write it, you should probably find somebody else to write it for you. It's just that, that could potentially, it should be leaving you with an icky feeling that you're doing that. Because then again, you have to, sign off, one way or another, whether or not you've seen the letter. In that respect, I would hope that you would check that you have seen the letter. So it's, it puts you in a really kind of icky, for lack of a better word, situation. So I would suggest, reaching out to somebody else.
What if it's a little bit different? I don't want to badger you on this. And if it's a topic you want to move on from, feel free. But I'm thinking more of cases where the recommender knows you well, they really like you, but maybe they're not confident in their own writing ability that much. Or maybe they just want to give you a gift and they want to say, I want to give you the best letter possible. Feel free to draft something for me.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, in that respect, again, that's where I think, submitting, your personal statement, submitting your resume to the person, and then maybe you can submit kind of a draft of a letter that, speaks to what you would ultimately want that person to say. And then I would ask that you then, ask the person to, tailor it and put it, also in their own words. And so that it is, so there is some concept of the other person's perspectives as well. So maybe you can do it in a dialogue. So maybe you do have a conversation with the person and you ask that person, tell me how you think of me, answer this question. How do you think I am as a critical thinker? And then you take notes. And so if that's how it gets done, that's how it gets done. So, much like I was saying, this is what I do when I brainstorm with clients about the personal statement. Brainstorm with this person about the letter and get them to answer questions that are directed and questions that are in their voice. And so basically you're the scribe more than the letter writer.
Right. Interesting. So it's more like you're making it easy as possible for them by, if they don't want to write, you can transcribe for them but still their words, you're just the one typing them.
Right. And their perspective. And then, they ultimately they're signing it. And I saw that there was a question about, I made the question about checking the box, whether you've seen it or not. I believe that when you're submitting the letters of recommendation, there's you need to delineate that you have not been, you have not seen the letter, and so that you're not influenced, you didn't influence the letter. I believe you have to check that as well. And so, but double check with the LSAC, all you applicants, double check with the LSAC as to what the stipulations for the letters of recommendation are.
Right. Yeah. I think from what I can remember, I think it's about waiving the right to see the letter.
Right. Okay. And that's what I'm not, it's getting late for this old lady. And so I'm not using words correctly. So yes, you're exactly right. You waive the right to see the letter. And so that's where that gets a little muddy, because if you're, co-authoring to some extent, you haven't necessarily waived that right.
Well, perhaps what you could do is if you transcribed a rough draft and then the author, the letter writer finalizes it, they submit it, and then you've waived your right to see the final draft.
The final draft.
But if they're free to show it to you if you would like, but you are not obligating them to show you.
Right. And I think that was where I was trying to go with it, in that you're writing a draft and you're writing an outline and then asking them to put it together in a final piece with their words. And so then again, if you're having that conversation and getting their perception and writing it and then giving it to them and ultimately they have to submit it on their own. You can't submit it for them. So, you are waiving the right to see the final draft. But again, it gets muddy, and I don't want to give a yay or nay to that approach.
Sure. No, but it's important. I think the precision of the language is important, because we don't want people saying anything untrue, as you said, because
right.
This is also becomes like an honesty issue, or with character and fitness, for example, where
right.
the letter of the questions matters a great deal.
Yes, and again, anecdotally, so we had an applicant that was he was transferring to the to BU, and he ran into trouble where he was having difficulty getting letters of recommendation by the timeline. But he had a couple of letters of recommendation that professors had written for internships and employment. And so he took those letters and submitted them for the application and checked that he had waived the rights. And then he got back, because what LSAC does is they verify the letters. And so when they went to verify to the professors, they were like, no, I didn't write a letter. And so he ended up being brought up on misconduct, and it was really messy. And so I'm not even sure if he was able to continue at the institution where he was, and he certainly wasn't admitted to BU. So again, it's, if it feels icky, don't do it. If it feels like you're reading, again, like the character and fitness questions, if you're reading the character and fitness questions and it feels like, oh, I think I should disclose this, but I'm not 100% sure, ask questions. Call admissions offices, ask directly, get as much information so that you are making the best informed decision and being truthful in everything that you do and are submitting. This is your first real official contract of your legal career. And this document is going to follow you throughout law school and then be a part of your bar application as well. And so you want to make sure that, T's are crossed, I's are dotted, and you can stand by every aspect of this application.
100%. Yeah. And you wouldn't want something coming back to bite you 3 to 4 years later, when you're like, this little tiny, what you thought was a white lie comes back. But these things, there's always a paper trail.
It always is. And again, I wish I could only count on one hand the instances where students have, gone through some hot water because of what they thought was just a minor discretion on the application. And then, like what you're saying, 2-3 years in, when they're applying to bar, for bar exam, and then it's coming back really to bite them, and you've already made this investment of time and money, and your legal career, it's potentially jeopardized.
Right. And from what I understand, the wording of these questions for character and fitness, it can actually vary significantly from school to school.
Oh, it does. It does. And, and one of it is because a lot of the questions are state driven. So driven by the laws of the state. And then it's driven by the interpretation of each school's general counsel and how they write them. So it does. It varies from school to school. What is concerning to one school isn't necessarily concerning to another. So, make sure that you read the question and answer the question as written for each school.
Right. Yeah. Excellent words of advice. Thank you for that. All right. So I want to be respectful of your time, Christine. You've shared so many great insights here. I think we've got one final question here that I want us to tackle, and then I'll ask you to share how best folks can reach you. So Janelle's asking, to what extent do you take into consideration where someone went for their undergrad? Does that affect their chances?
No. The only time that it's questionable, and this is becoming, I think less of a unicorn, is online degrees used to be not looked at. Unfortunately, when you think of higher education, it is a bit elitist. And so the ugly stepchild for a number of years was online education. Obviously that's been changing and evolving. And so I think that there's a little bit less of a stigma as it relates to that. And so that's why, the GPA is important. And the GPA shows how you, how you work in a classroom on a day-to-day basis. And so when there is a question as to perhaps the competitiveness of an institution, that's where the LSAT will come in and allow an admissions committee to do a more comprehensive look as to predictor of success. And so an applicant with a 3.8 from a large state institution versus an applicant with a 3.8 from a small private institution. In our mind, there was no difference in that student. And again, we're looking at all other components as to what opportunities those students took advantage of, how they spent their time outside of the classroom, what impact they made on their college campus, wherever that was, as a student, as a community member, all of those factors we took into account. So, we understood that, people make decisions based on what opportunities are available to them when they're 17, 18 years old. And that, there's a lot that goes into those decisions, as far as financial opportunities, what they've been exposed to and such. And so then it's a matter of what you've done with that opportunity. So again, long-winded answer for it's not a big deal, and it's becoming less of a big deal for those students that have online degrees.
Amazing. I appreciate your clarifying about the online degrees, because that is something I've been seeing more and more as well from applicants, and doesn't have the same stigma that it used to.
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, when we were looking, 10 years ago, and we were looking at online degrees, we'd be like, oh, I don't know. And now it's certainly becoming more the norm, and especially for those applicants that are coming, with military experience. That's largely how they're achieving their degrees. So yes, we wouldn't want to eliminate populations based on that.
Of course. And the other thing I want to emphasize as well is you said the LSAT score is that truly objective measure, constant across all schools. While GPAs and grade inflation can vary, the LSAT score is fixed.
Good point. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Christine, I really appreciate your sharing your advice with everyone today. Do you want to share the best way for folks to get in touch with you?
Sure. So I, again, as we talked about earlier, I'm a consultant for accepted.com, and we offer free consultations. And so I get to answer some questions for law school applicants. And so you don't have to buy any, big packages up front. But I'm happy to answer questions and kind of point you in the right direction as far as services go. And so I'm available at christine.carr@accepted.com. And that's CHRISTINE.CARR@accepted.com. But if you just Google Christine, accepted.com, you'll find me.
Perfect. Thanks, Christine. I'm typing that email in the chat here so folks can get in touch with you.
Great.
Well, thank you again for taking the time. I definitely encourage folks to reach out to you for that consultation. I'm sure it would be enormously useful for them.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.